Hello everyone and welcome back to the Council of Elrond. My name is Dave and of course I'm joined by my... Oh no, wait, actually this one is just on my own. Sorry guys, Johnny's actually unavailable for this one, but don't worry, he will be back for the full spoilery review. So I guess it's just Melon Head today. Today I am reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim by Warner Brothers, and I'm sure you guys are aware that this is the first of many movies that Warner Brothers are going to be bringing out over the next span of 10, 20, 50 years, who knows. They have a lot of movies in the pipeline, such as The Hunt for Gollum, which is being directed by none other than Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. And they have the likes of the upcoming Unnamed movie that's starring Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf and many other unnamed projects. Now, I do want to say that this is my initial reaction to The War of the Rohirrim and all opinions are my own. I am looking forward to going back and watching this movie again in theaters to gain more perspective. So, let's get into it. This movie did spark a lot of controversy when first announced. As we know, Tolkien was a master linguist and he was very specific about characters that he did and didn't mention in his stories and his narratives. And yeah, the central character in this movie is someone that he never mentioned. So what do we think about that? We're going to talk about it. This is the unnamed daughter of King Helm Hammerhand, the 9th King of Rohan. So what is this movie about? Well, let's look at an excerpt from IMDb. It reads, "A sudden attack by Wolf, a clever and ruthless Dunlending lord seeking vengeance for the death of his father, forces Helm Hammerhand, the king of Rohan, and his people to make a daring last stand in the ancient stronghold of the Hornburg." So there you go. It's interesting that there's no mention of Hera at all, as she is the main character, and this is a synopsis written by the studio or someone behind the movie. But yeah, this movie is set about 200 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings, and it's quite a long movie. It comes in at about 2 hours and 14 minutes, which is huge for an animated movie. It's probably, just over 2 hours when you cut out the credits at the end. But yeah, it's got some fans very excited because it is the return of none other than Philippa Boyens, who is basically in charge of the story, and you may know her name as she was probably the main writer behind the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movie. So she worked with Peter Jackson very closely on all 6 of his Middle-earth movies. And speaking of Peter Jackson, he actually does have some involvement as well with this, but it's probably more so as a consultancy role. So it says presented by Peter Jackson. And he was at the world premiere, so he fully endorses this movie. It is set in his world, the world he created, all from Peter Jackson's mind, basically. Now, this is an anime movie, and the animation is one of the biggest factors of the movie because it's never been done before. There's never been a Lord of the Rings movie in this medium before. It's directed by Kenji Kamiyama, who you may know from The Ghost in a Shell, amongst other Japanese anime. But I have to admit, anime is just not my thing. To be honest, as soon as the movie finished, I couldn't move for the amount of people that were telling me how much they loved the animation, how epic it was, and how incredible. But I guess I've just never really been a fan of anime or this style of animation. Sure, I watched Pokemon when I was younger, Yu-Gi-Oh!, what was it, Digimon, like all those kind of things, but that was just when I was waking up on a Saturday morning to eat some cereal and watch cartoons. I never really enjoyed the medium as a serious way of storytelling. There's other anime movies out there, is it Clash on Titan or something like that people have been begging me to go watch, and I've just never gotten around to it. But yeah, it's never been my genre of movies. Now, saying that, I think some of the background plates looked amazing, so some really well-crafted, detailed images, and also some of the panning shots were brilliant. But overall, it's not my cup of tea. And I do hope that the next Warner Brothers Lord of the Rings movie is live action. I'm not necessarily a fan, but I can appreciate what's been done, so I'm an appreciator. I think the storytelling is done well, and to be honest, it's not the most difficult job in the world because the story has been told and it's already been written. It was written by the great Professor Tolkien, but it is an adaptation, and Professor Tolkien's story takes place over about 2 pages in the Return of the King appendices book, so, you know, there has been additions. They have fleshed out some of the less spoken about characters, and of course they've added some new ones as well, which a lot of people are familiar with the likes of Hera. But the script from Ardie Papageorgiou and Philip O'Boyens' own daughter, Phoebe Gittins, is brilliant. Also, I have to mention Jeffrey Addis and Will Matthews, who worked on the screenplay, but you can clearly see the themes, the familiar themes of loyalty, hopelessness, betrayal, triumph, all the familiar things that you see in Lord of the Rings, they're all back. They're all prevalent from the beginning right up until the end, with a main cast of characters who I think really shone in this movie. So we've got Hera, who's played by Gaia Wise. I still think that the voice acting for her was incredible. We've got Brian Cox, who you can really feel his hard emotion in this movie. I don't know if this is the first time he's done any voice acting for an animation, but I think he was really, really good. I loved him in this movie. For me, he is Helm Hammerhand, and he always will be. To be honest, I think that was always going to be a win when you announced Brian Cox is going to be playing Helm Hammerhand. And speaking about some of the main cast of characters, we've got the villain, Wolf, who's voiced by Luca Pasqualino. And he's completely unhinged, frightening, and gradually just more and more terrifying throughout this movie. But I think you really get a grasp of his motivation behind this war that we're seeing on the screen, and you get a feel for the pain in his life with lots of new elements that are created to form his backstory. Because of course we don't get to see much of that at all in the book. We just get a couple of names and we've got to use our imagination from there. So I think this is the kind of stuff I don't mind seeing embellished, or not embellished, just added to. We have a named character of Wolf. We got a named character of Haleth. We got, but it's great to show a little bit of backstory and show why they're doing the things that they are doing. Now, obviously, we've mentioned her plenty of times. I think it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. And no, I'm not talking about the appearance of Mumakil in this film, because that was kind of unusual. But the elephant in the room I'm talking about is Hera. I don't think Hera needed to be in this movie. Now, I think this is both a positive and a negative. Now, hear me out. A lot of people have been hating on this movie ever since it was first announced years and years ago. The amount of people online saying this is some woke bastardization of Tolkien's writings is crazy. Without even watching the movie and coming up with all these conclusions, it's really been frustrating for me, especially after I got the chance to see the movie, and I'm promoting it just a little bit, and people are saying this is woke, this is trash. But the positive for me here is that they didn't shoehorn this character in to change a bunch of events and, to create their own story. Looking at you, Rings of Power. But it's more of a telling of the same story that we know through the eyes of the unnamed daughter, Hera. So it's just really her perspective on things. She is only mentioned once in the whole story as the king's daughter, I believe, is how she's mentioned. But she does play a very important part, as it is her hand that Freka is asking for his own son to marry. So it does make sense that she is in this movie, but yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been my choice to have her as a central character, but it is what it is. Now, they do go down the whole lost shield maidens of Rohan route thing, which is calling back to Éowyn's lines in The Lord of the Rings, but to be honest, I kind of liked it. I think it gave her nuance, it gave her a reason to exist, or I suppose if there wasn't any shield maidens of Rohan, I think then it would have been kind of pointless for Hera to be anyway important in this movie. I think people, myself included, were very worried that having Hera in this story was going to take away from King Helm Hammerhand and his story, because it ultimately is the story of Helm Hammerhand. But I don't think so. I think Tolkien fans are actually going to be genuinely pleasantly surprised with the, how would you call it, like the Helm Hera ratio, if that's what you want to call it, especially with the very heavy Hera marketing. Now, I understand that because you have made the decision that she is your central character, you're going to do a lot of marketing for Hera, but the marketing for this movie just wasn't good in general. There was a lot of people that complained about all the trailers, including footage from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, that this movie should be able to stand on its own 2 feet. And also most of the trailers that just showed the animation, it was all Hera. And yeah, I think that's not actually the movie that we got, which I'm pleasantly surprised with. So that's a plus for me. So let's get on to some positives and negatives. Let's start with some of the positives. And positive numero uno is we are so back, baby. We are back in Middle-earth. Well, we're back in Peter Jackson's Middle-earth. Yes, I had a bit of an argument with someone on X this week about like what is and isn't canon, what is Peter Jackson's canon, what is Rings of Power canon. But yes, this is in the style of Peter Jackson's movies. It's from Peter Jackson's mind. So we're back in this Middle-earth that we know and love. Another positive is just getting to see more of this Rohirrim culture expanded upon. Not just the culture, but we get to see the Helm's Deep or the Hornburg, and we get to see more of that. We get to see places that we didn't see of the Hornburg. The same could be said about Edoras and the Meduseld, and I just like seeing some of the traditions and some of the culture that we didn't get to see expanded upon in the likes of the Two Towers and the Return of the King movies. So I don't want to say too much, but you guys will see when you see the movie, and it's fun. Speaking about Peter Jackson's canon, I think one of the main things for me and my brother Johnny as well, the thing that we know and we love so much about The Lord of the Rings is the music. It's Howard Shore's score. It's absolutely unbeatable. But I have to say that the music in this film was great. Stephen Gallagher, shout out to you, my friend. It's a beautiful score that incorporates some great familiar themes with, of course, some new ones. And Hera's theme in particular, I think is an absolute banger. Also, there is the end credits, that it's like the Enya style song at the end, and it's done by Paris Paloma is her name, and it's just knockout. It's class. You've probably already heard it before, but it's got an extra oomph to it when the movie ends. You've got the credits rolling, and then you hear it. It's really Rohirric sounding, because you know, you have the fiddle, you've got the way Paris sings is kind of almost like Seanos singing from Ireland, if anyone knows what Seanos singing is. If not, yeah, it's just cool, traditional Irish kind of folky sound. And that's what the Rohirrim are to me. I imagine that they would come up with their music in barns and singing. The singing takes the centerpiece of your music. You've got a couple of instruments, but that's about it. Not like the Gondorians would remind me of having trumpets and brass and a much larger section of wind instruments. But when it comes to Rohan, it's very simple. 1 or 2 fiddles playing harmonies with each other. And yeah, I just think they nailed the music in this. And by they, I mean Stephen Gallagher. Another thing about this movie that's great is the voice acting. It's brilliant. We've got the likes of Brian Cox, as I mentioned earlier. We've got Gaia Wise, who plays Hera. So Brian Cox is Helm Hammerhand. And for me, there will never be another Helm. Just like Ian McKellen, there'll never be another Gandalf. There'll never be another Frodo. There'll never be another Christopher Lee. By the way, Christopher Lee is back in this movie, so that's pretty cool. Also, Miranda Otto, who you may know as Éowyn, she returns for this movie, but she's more of she's the voiceover, and she's kind of the narrator of the movie, plays the Morgan Freeman. So that was fun. Didn't really notice it much, actually, to be honest. But we also have the likes of Dom and Billy return for little cameos. No, they don't play Merry and Pippin. They do play the orcs, Shank and Rot, I believe their names are. And that's just a fun element of the movie. And another thing, I think about the movie is that a lot of that extra fluff that we see, for example, we've got the orcs, the appearance of Mumakil, the eagles, the Watcher in the Water, discussion about rings, all that kind of stuff. I think most of that took place in the trailers, and I'm not really sure why they added that in the movie. I think if we trimmed the fat on all that kind of excess stuff, I think the movie would have been a lot better. Another positive was the sound design. I thought it was absolutely great. It felt like we were in a live action movie. Felt like we were in a battle all the time. There was flames, there was shouting and roaring, people screaming, the charging of the horses I thought was brilliant. If you guys know the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson, well, those movies won an Oscar for the sound design, and we've seen clips like Peter Jackson at cricket stadium and getting all the fans to chant Derb Gu Narsh Gu to pretend that they're the Uruk-hai, and all these kind of things, and it really adds to the experience. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing if this movie has a behind the scenes, because I think it's going to be epic. I think the sound design and the sound production was incredible. Now, on to the negatives, and this movie does have negatives. It's definitely not a perfect movie, and starting off with, first of all, it's too long. It's far too long for a movie. Like I said, if they cut the fat, they trimmed the fat around some of the added things that they didn't need, like the Watcher in the Water, eagles, the orc stuff, some of it might be fun. I actually thought that some of it was just hard to look at in animation style. I thought it took away from the movie completely. I thought it might have been like added in the last 2 months just to give Hera something extra to do, or to appease to some of the Peter Jackson movie lovers. So I'm not really sure why they were included, some of those scenes, but it's definitely too long of a movie. Again, I mentioned another negative for me would be the animation style, but that's just my opinion. I know some fans are going to absolutely love it, and I'm curious to know if you're a fan of anime and a fan of Lord of the Rings, what you think of this movie. Please let me know in the comments. Not so much a negative, but just a point I wanted to make. I really love this story, and I think the fact that it is just 2 pages from Tolkien's book, it could have been done in like a 1 hour episode of like an anthology series on Netflix or whatever Warner Brothers got their hands on, probably Max. I think that might have been a much better medium to portray this story. And I think that's also due to the fact that this was kind of hyped, but then not really. But like the whole first Lord of the Rings movie in theaters for over a decade, all that kind of stuff. I think if they just had like a cool 4 episode anthology series, and this could have been one of the episodes, another episode based on something in Gondor, another episode based on something that happens in the Shire or Angmar or something like that. I think that would have been better. But look, they're just testing the waters, and I think it was a decent attempt. Another negative for me would be some of the side characters like Haleth and Hama. These are characters that are mentioned and that I was looking forward to seeing, and I think that they were just very forgettable. And even one of the characters, Leaf, it's funny because Philippa Boyens, she actually, when I was at the premiere, she came out on stage and she talked a little bit about the movie, and she introduced some of the people that were involved in creating the movie, and she actually mentioned Leaf by name and said, I'm very much looking forward to you guys seeing Leaf. I think he's just a wonderful character, and I was waiting for him to do anything memorable. But yeah, I think that's just something that really let down the side characters. I think, again, the main cast were brilliant. Brian Cox, Gaia Wise, I think they were really good. But the secondary guys, there was also, what was his name? Captain Targ, another bad guy. Yeah, not very memorable. Another thing is not so much of a negative, but I am just very curious to see if general audiences take to this movie, because I love this story. I've talked about it numerous times on our podcast. I've read it multiple times. It's only a short little story. It's cool. It's haunting. It's whatever. So when I was in the cinema and I was watching the start play out exactly how it does in the book, where Helm is calling Freka fat and then challenging him to a duel outside, and then eventually there's a one punch and then a war happens, I was into it, but I had to take myself out of it for a minute and think, what the heck are regular audiences that don't know anything about this story going to think? It must be very bizarre for them. So yeah, I don't know if this will work out. I feel like it could be a flop just because of the main audiences, and then you've got also the Tolkien lovers that hate anything other than the Tolkien books and Peter Jackson's first trilogy. So yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. I suppose my final negative for this would be, like I said, Hera did not need to be in this movie. I think the movie would be fine without her. I suppose she could be mentioned, just like she is in Tolkien's book. But I suppose for you to make her the central character and then not have her actually do anything of any importance to give her the central character role, it was kind of a downer. I suppose it's a relief to a lot of people. It was a relief to me that she wasn't taken away from Helm's story, but at the same time I was like, why? What is the reason that she is the main character of this movie? I think maybe she could have been a really, really cool, important secondary character, but I don't understand. I don't know why this wasn't just Helm Hammerhand's story. The War of the Rohirrim front character is Helm Hammerhand. And I suppose, I don't know, is it the studio that wanted her? They wanted a woman as the main character. But I think with all the backlash online, it wasn't justified with what she did in this movie. Now, should it be justified? Is that just what people expected from the get-go when they heard that an unnamed character is going to be the main character of this movie? I don't know. Is it more on us, the fans, or is it on the studio? But regardless, Hera did not need to be in this movie. So, final verdict, I'd say I'd give this a solid 7.5 out of 10. I think overall I like this film, but more so it's probably just for the excitement of the gateway of what more there is to come. We've got The Hunt for Gollum coming out in 2026. We've got new movies in the future. So if The Hunt for Gollum is a solid 8, 8.5, and then the next movie is a 10 or whatever, 9, 9.5, then I will be happy. But I think they're going to be churning out these movies and milking the IP of Lord of the Rings, whether that be good or bad, for the next foreseeable future, probably for decades and decades. And this is exactly what Tolkien would have hated, but yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about the whole thing. I'm excited to see more movies, and I think that Warner Brothers has taken the best care for the IP so far, so let's just see. I certainly hope this movie doesn't flop, but it's hard to know. We'll have to see what general audiences think. If it wins the hearts of people that aren't big Lord of the Rings fans, I believe it will do well. But yes, it looks like Warner Brothers are just testing the water, and I really hope the reaction is positive, because I definitely do want to see lots more movies set in Peter Jackson's canon, in the universe of Sir Peter Jackson. It could be really good. But guys, that is it. That is the review. You can let us know if you're excited about seeing the War of the Rohirrim. You can message us on X, on Blue Sky. We're actually on TikTok for some reason. You can get us on Instagram. But yeah, if you aren't subscribed to us on YouTube, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget to hit the little like as well. It'll be really good for our algorithm. But yeah, guys, don't forget to go watch this movie. It's in theaters on December 13th. So go watch the movie. And until next time, guys, adios.